You know, it's pretty tough to come up with something original when you've never seen it before. But what about those creepy mythical creatures then? Werewolves, vampires, or let's say, cyclopses? Don't worry, cyclops as we picture them never actually roamed the earth, as far as I know. But their creation definitely had some real-world inspiration. Turns out, ancient tales of these one-eyed giants might have been stirred up by a certain animal: dwarf elephants. Let's rewind to the Pleistocene era. It's where the inspiration for cyclops lies. When sea levels were lower, animals could waltz from one island to another. Elephants and mammoths were just chilling together. But then the Ice Age ended, and ice melted, and bam! Those land bridges were underwater, leaving some animals stranded. With food running low, smaller elephants had the best chance at survival, leading to dwarf versions that were just about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When those little elephants passed away, they left behind skeletons that might have looked like a giant with a single eye. The trunk, which is soft and doesn't fossilize well, was gone. And without tusks, the skulls could totally resemble something out of a monster mash. Yikes! So when the Greeks showed up and stumbled upon these skulls, they could have thought they had stumbled upon massive creatures with a single eye. And poof! The legend of the Cyclops was born. Remember that cute cartoon about a mermaid? Well, sorry to break your pink glasses, but the true story didn't end happily. The Little Mermaid and Eric did not tie the knot. In Hans Christian Andersen's original fairy tale, the Little Mermaid is faced with the choice to slay the prince. However, when it's time to act, she discovers that she is unable to harm him. Instead, she chooses to sacrifice herself to save him, ultimately turning into sea foam. Right, but where does the mermaid character come from? Hans Christian Andersen wasn't the first to dream up mermaids. Long ago, people thought the ocean was full of all kinds of mythical beings, like krakens and sea serpents, adding a bit of mystery to the waters. The earliest known half-fish, half-human character is Wanus, a Babylonian deity from the 4th century BCE who swam ashore by day and returned to the sea at night. Similarly, ancient Greek sirens, initially depicted as birdwomen, lured sailors to their demise in Homer's Odyssey. Over time, they've turned into the fish-tailed mermaids we know today, with the word siren now often meaning mermaid in several languages. Traditionally, they're wicked. Sure, mermaids are just make-believe, but their stories can grab people's imagination. Like Christopher Columbus. When he sailed in 1492, he swore he saw a mermaid. Spoiler alert, it was actually a manatee, which is basically the original sea cow. And they're not even that much of fish, they're closer relatives to elephants. Now, it might seem strange to mix up a lazy sea creature with a gorgeous half-fish lady, but it's not just Columbus who made that mistake. That's why manatees and their cousins, dugongs, are grouped together in Sirenia. In Japanese folklore, certain animals are attributed with supernatural qualities believed to affect human affairs. These entities fall under the category of yokai, specifically known as henge or shapeshifters. The most notable among these creatures are the cunning fox spirits called kitsune and the tanuki. Let's tackle this one step at a time. If you Google tanuki, you'll get a bunch of adorable pics in Google Images. The reason for that is simple. It is indeed tanuki in Japanese, but in English, we should say Japanese raccoon dog if we want to refer to an actual animal. However, the word tanuki can have two meanings, both an actual animal and its folklore namesake. The mythical version, called bake tanuki, pops up in stories and legends all over Japan, while tanuki are real animals. Bake tanuki are portrayed as quirky, supernatural beings. In some areas, the tanuki is said to have shape-shifting abilities, similar to those of foxes. It can become anything or anyone, and some stories even claim that it can possess humans. Now, kitsune are inspired by foxes. Their looks speak for themselves. These magical animals get wiser and more powerful as they age. Just like tanuki, they can shapeshift into humans or other forms, and they're known for their tricks. While some stories talk about kitsune playing pranks, others show them as loyal friends, or even lovers. Back in ancient Japan, foxes and humans hung out a lot, leading to all sorts of legends. By the way, the number of tails a kitsune has is the key. The more tails, up to 9, the older and more powerful it is. Some folks even make offerings to them as if they were deities. I mean, who wouldn't want a wise fox on their side? Today, dire wolves are widely recognized due to their connection with the Stark kids in Game of Thrones. However, these creatures were not merely a product of the show's creators' imagination. Much larger than contemporary wolves, dire wolves inhabited the Americas until their extinction around 10,000 years ago. Over 4,000 fossilized remains of these animals were unearthed at the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, where they may have become trapped while scavenging on the remains of other animals that had fallen in. The dire wolf had an exceptionally large skull, yet its brain was smaller compared to that of modern wolves. If they had possessed larger brains, they might have been more discerning and recognized the dangers posed by the tar pits. Additionally, while there is no record of albino dire wolves, albino cubs have been documented among modern wolves. Check out this creepy sea serpent with multiple heads. It's called the hydra in Greek mythology, and according to the legend, one of its 9 heads was immortal. So every time you lopped one off, 2 more popped up. Hercules had to take on this beast as one of his biggest challenges, and his nephew lent a hand. While Hercules was busy playing whack-a-mole with the heads, his nephew was cauterizing the wounds to stop them from coming back. Eventually, he managed to chop off the immortal head and buried it under a hefty rock. Believe it or not, this wild story might have had a basis in reality. There are a few documented cases of snakes with multiple heads, though 9 is pretty rare. Reptiles seem to be more prone to this kind of thing compared to other animals. Still, no records about one of those heads being immortal. Duh. Giants have been a part of stories forever. Take Greek mythology, for example. There's the Gigantus, a wild crew of 100 giants that sprang from Gaia after she had had a rough breakup with Uranus. Not exactly a fairy tale, right? Then there's Ergelmir from Norse mythology, who was born when icy Niflheim waters mixed with the fiery heat of Muspelheim. Now let's switch gears to real-life giants. Some folks had a condition called hereditary gigantism, which helps explain the tales of these towering figures. Scientists think they found a gene linked to it. Plus, some people have pituitary tumors that kick growth hormones into overdrive. Take Goliath, for example. He was reportedly over 9 feet tall. There's no universal height for a giant since it varies by culture. A study even suggested that Goliath might have had a genetic background contributing to his size. When David took him down with a slingshot, he hit Goliath right in the forehead. Imagine if Goliath had had a pituitary tumor messing with his eyesight. It would have been a classic case of, didn't see that one coming. And speaking of giants, meet Robert Wadlow, the tallest guy ever recorded. He stood at an insane 8 feet 11.1 inches and weighed 439 pounds. Basically, a human reindeer. As a kid, he was always the tallest. At 8, he was already as tall as his father, and by 9, he could carry him around. By graduation, he had hit 8 feet 4 inches.
The liger is probably the most popular hybrid animal and an incredibly large cat. You won't see them in the wild. People most deliberately breed them. Lions and tigers don't even inhabit the same areas. So, a liger is a mix of a male lion and a female tiger, and they can grow to be very big in a pretty short period of time. They're actually the biggest cats in the world. Hercules, the largest recorded liger, is a real example of that. 922 pounds and 10.8 feet long. Imagine taking him for a walk. Ligers are mostly way bigger than either of their parents. In most cases, they behave and look more like lions than tigers. But they have some tiger traits too. For example, striped backs, and they're crazy about swimming. The taigen. Nobody could fault you for thinking the taigen and liger are basically the same animal. I mean, they're both a combination of tigers and lions. but a taigen comes from a crossbreeding of a male tiger and a female lion. They're usually smaller than their parents, and definitely much smaller than their giant, could you call them siblings? In most cases, they inherit charming looks from their tiger fathers, but they get some interesting traits from their mother's side too. For example, love for socialization and the ability to roar. Hands down, one of the rarest hybrid animals in the world are wolfins. These fellas are a mashup of a female bottlenose dolphin and a male false killer whale. Its name might make you think differently, but a false killer whale belongs to the dolphin family. They're not even related to killer whales. Wolfins are such an interesting 50-50 mix and balance of their parents. They have dark gray skin, the perfect blend of a black false killer whale and light gray dolphin skin. Dolphins have anywhere between 80 and 100 teeth. False killer whales have 44, and their hybrid young is halfway, with 66 teeth in total. What would it look like if algae and a slug paired? No need to imagine. You have a green sea slug to check the result. It lives in salt marshes in Canada and New England, and it's possibly the weirdest hybrid creature you'll see in this video, and in general. Part plant, part animal. So, some slugs seem to have been very sneaky while stealing the genes from innocent algae that they have eaten to enable them to look like this. Since they're partially a plant, they can produce the plant pigment called chlorophyll. That means these unusual slugs can even photosynthesize. That's the process plants use to turn sunlight into energy. So they produce their own molecules that contain energy without having to eat anything at all. When scientists first discovered it, a green sea slug was the first case of a multicellular animal that's able to produce chlorophyll. What do you get when you mix a male leopard and a female lion? You get an interesting hybrid called a lepin. These animals grow to be almost as big as lions, but they still have shorter legs, similar to their father leopard. They inherit some of his other traits too, like a love for climbing and swimming. You can have a union with a male lion and a female leopard too, and the result is called a leopard. Male lions are usually around 10 feet long and weigh about 500 pounds. The female leopard is way smaller, only 5 feet long, with a weight of about 80 pounds. The difference in size here is too big, so this pairing really doesn't happen that often. Okay, how about a buffalo and a cow? When you were little, maybe you thought that they could be a good match, but in reality, the combination creates an unusual hybrid animal called a beefalo. Not many types of hybrid animals can reproduce on their own, but a beefalo can do it. When a grizzly and a polar bear get together, it results in a growler bear, or grizzly bear, or grizzlar, whichever you like the most. You can see them even in the wild. These two types of bears have a mutual contempt for one another. Yep, they're not good at living together in a mutual habitat. But even though it's rare, the love can still happen and result in these cute caramel-colored hybrid growler bears. In most cases, they'll be a bit smaller than polar bears, on average 60 inches tall at the shoulder, and approximate weight 1,000 pounds. But they're well equipped for surviving in warmer climates, thanks to the genes they got from their grizzly family side. Now let's get to one pretty tough fella, the jag lion. As its name implies, it's the hybrid of a jaguar and a lion. We don't know much about these intriguing big cats because only a few of them exist. But there was an unintentional mixing between a black jaguar and a lioness, which eventually resulted in 2 jag lion cubs. One had a dark gray coat with black spots because of the dominant melanin gene black jaguars usually have. The other one had a lion color and the rosette pattern spots that remind you of a jaguar. Yep, you already know it. There are also ligwars, a hybrid of a female jaguar and a male lion. That's some colorful family. Speaking of wild cats, have you ever heard of a savanna cat? Savanna cats are in both categories of house pets and exotic hybrids, since they're a mix of a domestic cat and a wild African serval hybrid animal. We're talking about striking animals, almost as big as a domestic cat. But what gives them their exotic look are their tall bodies, slender forms, and spotted coats. These cats are extremely loyal, intelligent, and loving creatures. Here's one unexpected mixture, a zebroid. Technically, it's a name people use to describe a hybrid of a zebra and any equine species. But when you pair a zebra and a horse, their young is called a zorse. Zebra hybrids mostly look like whichever animals they've been crossbred with, but with the striped coat of a pure zebra. Most of these hybrid creatures don't even have fully striped coats. You can mostly see the stripes on non-white areas of their bodies and legs. Speaking of zebra hybrids, check out this adorable creature. It's called a zonkey, or zedonk, zebras, zenki, take your pick. They're mostly either tan, gray, or brown in color. You'll distinguish them by unique stripes that are darkest on their legs and belly. Unlike some hybrids, such as the liger, zonkies can normally live in the wild. In fact, that's where you can find them, living life to the fullest across savannas and open woodland, mostly in Africa. Can you guess what a geep is? Yep, a combination of goat and sheep, and definitely one of the most adorable and cuddliest hybrid creatures in this video. Geeps are very rare. Some experts even believe it's possible that they're not true hybrids, but just sheep with certain genetic abnormalities. After all, sheep and goats do carry different numbers of chromosomes, which means cross-species mixes are almost impossible. When a camel and a llama get together, you get a cute little thing called a kama. Similar to beefalo, the kama also produces the best economic traits of both its parents. The first one was born in 1998. Kamas don't have camel humps. Their body is covered in soft, fleecy fur, similar to their llama side of the family. They can drink big amounts of water at a time, so they can survive with almost no water at all for pretty long periods. The coy wolf is a hybrid where nothing looks that unusual to most people, since the coyote and the wolf are not that drastically different in their looks. After all, these two species only diverged around 200,000 years ago. Now they're still able to mate and bring coy wolf cubs to the world. People living in eastern Canada and the US might be familiar with these smart, adaptable animals that inhabit their forests, neighborhood parks, or sometimes even cities. These hybrids have emerged over the past century or so, and they've picked up the characteristics of both their parents. When a coy wolf is fully grown, it's somewhere in between the size of both parents, but it's also 55 pounds heavier than pure coyotes and has a bigger jaw, longer legs, smaller ears, and a bushier tail. Check out the narluga, an extremely rare creature whose parents are a narwhal and a beluga whale. It's a pretty strange animal, but far from being lonely, they mostly live in the North Atlantic. Scientists had suspected their existence for decades. In 1990, they found an unusual-looking whale skull located in an Inuit hunter's tool shed in Greenland. People from that area said that there were other similar-looking animals, and they fit the description of neither a beluga whale nor a narwhal. People said they had gray skin, narwhal-like tails, and beluga-like flippers. Narwhals and beluga whales are similar in size, and they share a family, the Monodontidae family. So it may not even be that surprising that they're able to successfully breed in the wild. Mermaids are real, but not in a way you'd expect. Sure, we've seen them in movies and animations and heard about them in fairy tales, but we've also been convinced they're just stories made up by sailors that probably got a bit too bored out at sea. These creatures, looking half human and half fish, have indeed been spotted, but they're not nearly as attractive as you'd imagine. Christopher Columbus painted a pretty accurate description of what he saw while on his trip to America. Creatures that were not so beautiful as they were said to be, for their faces had some masculine traits. So, no, he didn't stumble upon Ariel out there. He caught a glimpse of manatees and another closely related species, the dugong. These animals are collectively called sea cows because of how big they are. By the time it reaches adulthood, a sea cow can be 6 feet long, around the size of a human. These creatures also have bones on their flippers that resemble fingers. What about the terrible kraken, the most feared sea creature ever to be spotted by sailors? Is it real too? Back in the day, The Kraken used to be described as this evil octopus that made a career out of sinking ships and hurting the crew on board. It even got creative with its antics. If a ship was strong enough to resist its huge arms, it would swim in circles around it, creating a whirlpool that eventually sank the vessel. This genius sea villain isn't as big or bad as it was described. Yes, it does exist. We just call it the giant squid these days. There are no records of a giant squid ever attacking or sinking a boat. There's still little we know about these creatures because they live deep in the sea and are hard to study. We do know, though, that they can grow up to 60 feet long, which is scary enough if you ever got sight of one. Dragons are everywhere these days, in popular TV shows and books. Different dragon-like creatures have been described in stories from varying cultures, from Asia to Northern Europe. But their basic traits include reptile-like bodies, wings, and scary claws. Oh, and they're also said to breathe fire out of their mouths. Has any human actually met a dragon and got to tell the story? Sure, just not a live one. Long before we knew what dinosaurs were, people kept stumbling upon fossils of giant creatures that had all those creepy features we now associate with dragons. The claws, the wings, and the reptile-like bodies. As with everything else, humans tried to make up a story for what they discovered, even if they didn't necessarily have scientific information to back it up in the old days. Since dinosaur fossils have been found on every continent of our planet, including Antarctica, it's easy to see why there are dragon variations in a lot of cultures. We think of unicorns as these mystical creatures that only existed in fairy tales, but there was once an animal that fit the description of the one-horned creature. It was called the Cytomotherium, and it roamed Earth about 10 million years ago. Sure, it looked more like a cow than a horse, but it did feature one big cylindrical horn in the middle of its forehead. However, it did have another much smaller horn right next to it. They most likely used these horns to attract the opposite gender, but it's really hard to know for sure. I mean, they lived a pretty long time ago. Some other depictions of unicorns seem like they rather speak about the rhinoceros than anything else. The Siberian unicorn, for example, was a bigger and sturdier creature that lived in Eurasia until it went extinct around 39,000 years ago. And it wasn't as elegant as a horse, since it weighed 4 tons. Luckily for its human contemporaries, the Siberian unicorn was an herbivore and preferred munching on some grass. Most of these famous mythological creatures are hybrid combinations of real animals, and the griffin makes no exception to this rule. It was described as having the body, tail, and back legs of a lion, and the wings, front legs, and head of an eagle. Generally, griffins weren't seen as dangerous creatures. Most cultures know them as respectable guardians of important buildings and national treasures. Some of them are seen watching over Notre Dame in Paris. There used to be times when griffins roamed Earth too, but we humans didn't get to meet them. They were a species of dinosaur called the Protoceratops. It used to walk on 4 legs and did feature a beak, though it doesn't seem like it had any wings. But because of that beak, people instantly associated the fossils with that of a bird and presumed it had wings too. This misconception was also supported by the fact that the Protoceratops had really large shoulder blades. People living near the Himalayas have spoken for years about huge and hairy creatures about 6 feet tall. Back in 1921, a group of British explorers said they had found some intriguing-looking footprints while climbing Mount Everest. The culprit? The famous Yeti, probably. This one is real too, but it's not really a big fluffy person with a big shoe size. The Yeti is, in fact, a bear species living in the Himalayan region. These brown and black bears are big and hairy. Further DNA research has shown that a lot of that hair, teeth, skin, and fur belong to those bears, and were mistakenly associated with the mythological creature. Americans have their own version of the human-like hairy creature, but they call it Bigfoot, or the Sasquatch. It was said it lived in the northwestern United States and western Canada. Bigfoot was also kind of smelly and made some really weird high-pitched noises. As for this one's footprints, they were also considerably large, around 24 inches long. British explorer David Thompson was thought to be the first one to see the footsteps of the North American beast in 1811. A lot of photographs and videos have appeared since then, but none have been proven to be true. So scientists still think Bigfoot doesn't exist. Dire wolves have been described as both fierce protectors of their lands and people living there, but also as vicious, huge wolves, easily capable of taking down humans. This myth had to grow up around something. In reality, these dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, by the end of the last major ice age. Sure, they might not have been huge monsters, but they were larger than a standard wolf we see these days. Based on recent research, they used to weigh anywhere around 132 pounds and were capable of hunting really large animals: horses, camels, mastodons, and even bison. They had larger teeth and a stronger bite than our contemporary wolves. This one may not be so familiar to most people, but the roc was described as an enormous bird of prey in Middle Eastern literature. There's even a roc in 1001 Nights, the famous collection of Middle Eastern folktales. The way the roc is described varies from region to region, but it's mostly said it was an eagle, powerful enough to pick up an elephant. No wonder people were scared of it, since it could have easily picked up humans and carried them over long distances. Not to mention you had no way to defend yourself against this bird, since bothering it mid-flight meant you could be dropped from a great height. Based on this nightmarish description, this creature most likely did not exist. But there are some fossil records that could explain where the myth came from, like those of a creature named the elephant bird of Madagascar. It was twice as tall as the average human, but it couldn't fly. It looked more like an ostrich, with really sturdy and muscled legs.
Something exciting and kinda unexpected popped out among the rocks of the Ica Valley in Peru. The bones of a really old whale that lived almost 40 million years ago. At first, no one was really impressed because the bones they found were big and weirdly shaped, so people just thought they were looking at giant boulders. I mean, that's cool too, but things got way better when they realized those were the remains of a very large ancient animal that roamed along the coast of ancient Peru. Plus, it was probably the heaviest creature that ever lived. Sorry, blue whale, I know you worked hard to get to the top. The length of over 100 feet and weight of more than 200 tons brought you the status of the biggest animal on our planet. But it seems you've held the title long enough. Time to hand it over to our next candidate, and that one's really gigantic. This ocean beast was probably shorter than the blue whale, but heavier, with a weight that could be between 93 tons and 370 tons. If it's closer to the higher number, it'll make Prehistoric the biggest animal ever known to have lived on Earth. And it seems its weight was the result of having extremely thick, dense bones. You can see such bones today in manatees or some other early whales. Dense bones are a great tool for such marine mammals. This feature makes them heavy and allows them to stay submerged most of the time. But at the same time, if their body was too heavy, they would end up sinking all the time, and they would waste too much energy to move back up to the surface. So, to avoid sinking, marine mammals need to have enough lighter tissues, like muscles and fat, to help them float in the water without using too much energy. Now, scientists didn't have the whole skeleton, which makes it hard to tell how big the animal was. But they used the ratio of the heavy bones to the lighter tissues in other marine mammals to estimate the overall weight of this giant ancient whale. Experts found these fossils about 13 years ago and spent the next decade freeing the whale from the rock. Its anatomy and age showed this whale was a cousin of Basilosaurus, a whale that had a long snout full of sharp teeth, and a sleek body similar to that of an eel. Even if Pericetus wasn't bigger than the blue whale, it was still a giant that ruled the ocean depths. Unlike modern whales, there's a possibility that this ancient fellow was a predator that liked to go after bigger prey. And this also changes how we see the history of whales. Scientists used to think these magnificent creatures became really big about 5 million years ago when they started eating lots of small creatures. But here's the proof that giant whales existed even before that. But it's still unclear how this whale managed to find enough food to sustain its enormous body. Plus, it's still hard to tell what exactly this ancient creature had on its menu. It was pretty large and not such a fast swimmer, so it's possible it searched for food in shallow waters. Then it probably ate crustaceans, clams, or some other small animals hiding in the sand. One theory says it was a scavenger, which basically means it munched on remains of everything that would come its way. It's not so unusual to find marine animals in deserts. Many of these regions used to be covered with water anyway. The Sahara in Africa is a perfect example. About 50 to 100 million years ago, this was not a dry desert, but a shallow saltwater body called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. The land is not wet there anymore, of course, but people who lived in that area knew about it because they used to find old shells across the desert. The sea was about 164 feet deep. That sounds enough for a nice swim. Some would say this area looked like modern Puerto Rico, with lots of sun and shallow water. Mangrove forests were a common thing as well as seafloors covered with mollusks, like snails and clams. The marine sediment that was left behind after the sea had dried up is full of different fossils. And the animal that lived in that ancient underwater world didn't look friendly. Plus, they were much bigger than their relatives from modern times, so a regular-sized human would end up as a snack, not even a whole meal. Normally, when animals live on small islands, they can become much bigger than their relatives from the mainland. This is something we call island gigantism, and it happens because there are more resources or fewer predators on islands. Maybe the same thing happened in the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Even though it wasn't an actual island, the water moved in and out, which created little pockets of water. And specific conditions in these pockets might have helped animals grow bigger. So we're talking about giant sea snakes, catfish, and fish that no longer exist today. One had incredibly strong jaws, and the animal used them to eat hard things and even crush shells. Their teeth showed they were fierce predators other animals had every reason to be afraid of. They went through some changes when it came to diet, similar to some types of piranhas. And the competition to get to the top of the food chain wasn't a joke. Not when there were also such large predators as sharks, crocodiles, and ancient relatives of elephants. Sahara went through different phases. If you could use a time machine and take a peek at Earth's largest hot desert as it was about 6,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to struggle with sand and heat. You'd have a nice walk through a green and pretty lush place. In the past, people who lived in that area didn't leave drawings on cave walls that showed camels, sand dunes, and scorpions. All those things you'd see in today's Sahara. Instead, they drew crocodiles. That's additional evidence that the Sahara used to have a lot of water and plants enough to support these big yet scary animals. Around 3 billion years ago, Earth might have been mostly covered with water. Today, it's about 71% of its surface, but it seems that our planet used to be a giant ocean world with no continents at all, just some scattered islands. Scientists studied special rocks in Western Australia that formed in a place deep under the ocean called a hydrothermal vent system. To explain this better, it's important to mention two common oxygen types, O16 and O18. O18 is heavier because it has extra neutrons. O16 evaporates from water more easily, and as researchers studied an old ocean floor, they found a lot of O18, more than in today's oceans. This way, they realized ancient Earth had less dry land than Earth today. Australia is a good spot to conduct these studies because a long time ago, it also used to be a beautiful place with large animals and lush rainforests. But as time went by, the land became drier and Australia had more deserts formed, such as the Great Victoria Desert. Rainforest remained only on the edges of the continent. What happens with deserts across the globe is called desertification. That's when land that used to be good for growing things turns into a desert or something similar. Our planet changes over time, together with its climate. But desertification also happens because of human activities, like mining, farming, and building cities. And when land turns into a desert, it's a problem because it can't support people and animals anymore. Food doesn't grow there. There's not enough clean water, and animals lose their homes. To help with this problem, there's a plan many countries agreed to. They decided to work with farmers to take care of the land, fix damaged areas, and manage water better. All in all, to make our planet a better place for life.